So thank you everyone for joining. Today we're going to be going over Workspace Studio, which is a new tool that's been released by Google over the last couple of weeks. So it hasn't been out for long and they're already making updates to it. So there's probably stuff in there that I would have spoken about or wouldn't have spoken about 2 weeks ago that I will now speak about. It's going to be an evolving tool, and I'll talk about what the tool is and what it delivers. And therefore being in it quite regularly is probably the key thing when it comes to like staying on top of this. And we'll try and share things that come out to it in Slack. But I think just being in it and using it is probably the primary way of learning how to navigate it. I am as well going to be hosting what I'm calling as a new format, which is a masterclass. And this masterclass is going to be over the course of 4 weeks, where we spend an hour every week to basically try some new things in this tool. And the idea is in the final week, we'll basically build a use case that actually enables you in your role quite effectively, as opposed to just maybe doing some research or summarizing your unread emails. So something a bit more effective is the aim for that masterclass. So I'll share the link with that as well, and maybe show some of that content as we go. So Google Workspace Studio is a new tool, as I said, released by Google. And it is probably the easiest tool for everyone that uses Google tools to access to start automating their workflows. So to actually start making this like agentic shift, as people keep talking about it. It's the easiest way to make some agentic workflows, potentially do some work on your behalf, hence why we're talking about it today. The tool itself, so in reality, like in work today, we're being asked more than ever to deliver more than we ever have. And this is thanks to AI, right? Normally, headcount would increase as we're being asked to deliver more, or at the very least, we would have a real plan of how we're going to deliver more. A lot of what is happening now from our clients actually telling us, so through some of the feedback we've received recently, we're expecting your teams to be able to deliver more on AI. Like it's no longer a nice to have that you're learning a bit of AI, or maybe you're just sending the odd chat message into Gemini. A lot of managers now are saying, we want our teams to be AI native. And therefore, when they're thinking about a new task, they're thinking about not these are the systems that I need to stitch together, or this is the format that I might output this thing in. They're more thinking, what's the prompt that I need to write to get 90% of the way there, and then they'll tweak the rest. And that doesn't work in every use case, and knowing which use cases it works in is quite relevant too. But for now, this is the kind of direction that we're being given. Your teams need to be showing us that they're actually doing stuff with AI that's beyond the odd message into Gemini. Hence why we're having our webinar today, and hence why I'm going to be running a masterclass on this particular topic. So I think this is one of the best ways of us actually showing value from these AI workflows. The goal is to move from this like human router to a much more strategic architect. So using AI inside workflows to enable us to deliver more. Let's talk about what that looks like. Previously to this, and in fact, even just 2 months ago, I held a webinar which was like, AppScript is your best friend. AppScript lets you automate a whole bunch of stuff from your spreadsheets, from your documents, from your emails. Use AppScript. You should be building an AppScript. My suggestion now would be no, you should start in Google Workspace Studio, find limitations, and then you might need to shift over to AppScript. And in the masterclass, sorry for pitching the masterclass so much, I wasn't anticipating doing this, it's just coming up. In the masterclass, we will be, as part of that, actually building a custom application in AppScript and using that within our workflow. So that is something else to look out for. You might have used Zapier or Make. These require your team to have a subscription to them, or you're really, really limited in what you can do. You can have like one thing going in the top, and you can maybe process it 200 times a month, and then you're done. You've got to pay for more. And obviously, your team need to agree that they're happy for your data to even be in these platforms in the first place. You are, a lot of you anyway. Well, actually, I guess if you're on this webinar, I like to think you're using Google tools and technologies. You are able to use Google Workspace flows as part of your enterprise license, and therefore it's already included in the package of tools that you have. Or you might have asked IT, and as we know, IT, they don't always get it right. They always have a backlog that they need to work through, and your task needs to be big enough for them to even care about in the first place. And it probably won't meet all three of those criteria. If it does, then you probably should still talk to IT, because they want to build something much more robust that will benefit the entire team, I would imagine. Just wanted to caveat, if you know much about Google tools, if you've done the certification, the Gen AI certification, then you probably know about the tool Agent Space. Google Studio, Workspace Studio is not Agent Space. They are two distinct tools. Agent Space is a enterprise grade tool to collect data from systems, use RAG over the top of that data, so retrieval augmented generation. Again, if you've done your certification, hopefully you know what RAG is. To be able to ingest data from those systems and use those in a chat interface, something that enables you to ask questions about campaign performance data in relation to opportunities. Potentially, it's like the ideal state for Agent Space, where it's connected to multiple systems. Google Workspace Studio is much more about you or your team's individual requirements in making yourself more efficient or your team more efficient. And it is a sort of trigger-based system where something happens, some action happens largely without your input, and it will produce an output. Whereas Agent Space is much more conversational, so just bear that in mind. There are definitely use cases where Agent Space makes 100% more sense than Google Workspace Studio. So I'm going to be diving into the tool in a minute. And actually, I'm going to show you around the interface, show you some of the things that you should try, and then we're just going to build a couple of examples. And in that building examples, I want to show you some quick techniques that you can start using from today. And in the masterclasses, we will expand on these examples, and we'll actually, every single masterclass will have two things that we'll build together, building in complexity. So in Workspace Studio, every action starts with a trigger. I will go through the triggers, and we can talk through the triggers in a minute, but everything starts with a trigger. And that trigger could be a time-based trigger, or it could be an activity-based trigger. Time-based triggers happen at a certain period of time, and they can repeat within certain intervals. The lowest interval is 15 minutes. The highest interval, I can't remember. Maybe it's a year, maybe it's a month. It's a big number. We'll have a look at that together. Then, inside your workflow, you have agentic steps. And these agentic steps, traditionally, I would say, aren't really agentic. It says that they're agentic in the UI, because obviously Google wants to be seen as being an agentic company. But the agentic steps that you do are all the hands bit. So in this diagram, these are all the tools that you interface with. These are sort of what would normally traditionally say what an agent is, which is like something that can reason, make decisions, do actions, and leverage tools based on the stuff that it's decided to do. So based on those actions. And so we have a set of Gemini skills that enable us to do all that reasoning before then putting that reasoning into some action. And we're going to build a couple of things today if we've got time. We'll definitely build one thing, ideally two things. We've got time in the session today. And then you've got the hands, the actions. These are the largely Google-based tools today, but there are some third-party integrations that enable you to do things like add a row to a spreadsheet, send someone an email, draft an email, create a new document, create a new tab in a document. Like all of these things you can do as part of Google Workspace Studio. There are some others like MailChimp. You could build a custom one to Marketo if you wanted to. You could use the out-of-the-box Salesforce one to pull back Salesforce information or create opportunities, etc. But every single workflow basically starts in that order. So you have a trigger at the top, that's time-based or it's activity-based. You've got some Gemini thinking generally. You don't always have to have this. And then you have some actions that happen based on that thinking. So the first thing that I want to build is a research tool. And I want this research tool to do a couple of things for me. I've got some prompts somewhere. Let me boot up my Gemini actually, and I will grab these prompts that I've sort of pre-scripted just so that we're not taking a huge amount of time. By the way, on the left-hand side, you can see what I normally do, the activities I do with my children in Gemini, like crushing a hydraulic toy sloth with a hydraulic press. My daughter is fascinated with hydraulic presses. I don't know why, but she can't get enough. Cool. So I've got some prompts here, and I'll talk through this in just a second. But first, welcome to the studio, so Workspace Studio. When you first go to Workspace Studio, that you can get to from flows.workspace.google.com, you may wish to follow along with me today if you've got two screens and you want to build something like this, or you want to just navigate around and have a look. You'll first hit the Discover tab, and this tab is really, really good for getting ideas about the types of apps that might actually change your workflow. So the first couple that I started with was a daily summary. So get me the emails that I didn't read yesterday and just summarize them for me, see if I actually need to go back and read them or not. I think another one that I got was like pre-meeting briefs. So 10 minutes before every meeting that I have, it looks through my inbox. Actually, I've added that bit, but it looks through my inbox and tries to find relevant information that will prep me for that next meeting that's coming up. Or I think another one I had early on was like an automatic email categorizer. So it uses Gemini to determine what type of email I've just received, and then it sticks it in the right category for me. So whether that's something I need to respond to, whether it's marketing, and I need to unsubscribe potentially, or that kind of stuff. So those are some of the just basic ones that I started with. My suggestion to you should be come in here and have a look around and pick some. When I first started, caveat, this was the first day that this came out. None of mine actually worked. I had to go in and update the prompt and change the prompt. I'm sure they probably work now, but you can test them, and we'll go through what testing them looks like together in a minute. The other thing that you have here is my agents. These are existing agents that you currently have. As you can tell, I've been in here playing around quite a lot. So this is where you'll actually start building and managing your agents over time. A couple of caveats. There's no folder structure at the moment, so naming convention is probably quite relevant to start off with if you ever intend on having many of these. There may be a folder structure in the future, and there is also no search option, so I can't search any of these. I'm literally scrolling down a long list. So as you can tell, this is quite a new tool that Google have released. Inside the activity tab on this agent screen as well, you can see how your apps have been running. So I've got a number of different apps that run for me today. Some of them have been tests, other ones are ones that are actually happening all the time, and you can see those in here. And this is a great place to check for if you have any errors as well. So had issues is a nice place to just sort of come in and have a look at all of these. This is one of the caveats that we'll come on to later. Gemini is not always available in this tool. So yeah, we'll come on to that later. Let's build our first app. So what I want to build, you'll notice here that I've already built it earlier on today, but we'll build it fresh together now, is I want to build something that looks at competitors and within the last 7 days, what those competitors have been up to, and gives me a summary based on things that might potentially impact me as an individual. So I've assumed in my role today, I've assumed that I work for Google Workspace Flows, and I care about what my competitors are doing. So NAN, Zapier, Make, maybe Google Power Automate, but I think I've just got 3 or 4. Oh, Flowwise is another competitor I have that I'm going to look at. And what I want to do is gather research on these companies that's within the last 7 days. I then want to validate that what's been gathered is actually within the last 7 days and is relevant and isn't made up and is not hallucinating. And then I want to score the information that's come back to me so that I can determine if it's even worth me having it sent to me. And then I want to store that information so that next time that my workflow runs, it knows what it picked up last time, so it's not just going to suggest the same stuff to me again if it's come out again in the same 7 days. Quite a complex workflow, but we should be able to step through it and make it really simple. So I'm going to hit the plus button. That gets me into a new agent. I'm going to name my agent. So my Demo researcher. That's probably spelt wrong. I apologize. First step, we have a schedule, we have a trigger. The trigger for us, because we're building a researcher, is going to be on a schedule. So this is just something that will happen once a week for me, do some research, and then pull me back a result. However, you'll see here that there are a number of different trigger-based, much more sort of action-based triggers. So when something happens related to me, when I receive an email, or when a document that I care about changes, or when an item is added to a folder, I can take action on that kind of information. But for now, I'm just going to use a trigger. My schedule is going to be once a week. So these are the options that we have for repeating. So I'm going to say it will happen weekly. The biggest option you here have is annually. You'll notice there's nothing like biannual or any specific dates. This is quite fixed. You can work around that. I don't really care about the date and time because it's just a demo, but you can change the time zone if this is relevant to in this little drop down. So bear that in mind. My next step is I'm going to use Gemini to go and do some research for me. So I'm going to ask Gemini. Oh, I should have probably stepped through these different steps actually in a little bit more detail. Apologies. Let's not just build, let's talk. Our agents, as we said before, in reality, these are just prompts over to Gemini. The prompts that you write, so if I jump into this Gemini one, the prompts that you write, obviously you put them in this box and they can be a reasonable length. I've got prompts that are over 1,000 characters long in my workflow. And then you also have this option here. So sources Gemini can use this. If you have Workspace and connected apps, that will use the apps that are connected to your Google account. So it means that it can go and read Word documents for you, Google Docs for you, spreadsheets. It can look in your email account, much like if you go to Gemini today. I should show you this, and you use these tools. You can get it to look at your emails. And the way that you can turn that on, if you haven't got it on already, is if you go to settings and go to apps. This is where your connected apps sit. So this is a connected app. These are connected apps. And this is the most important one if you want Gemini to actually be able to work on your account. So to be able to do things inside your account is having this one turned on here. And once you hit that button, you might have to go through a couple of extra steps. It's like, do you approve this? Do you want us to do X, Y, and Z? But just have a look at that if you don't see that option in your Workspace Studio. Where am I? So as I write a prompt, I could then ask it to go and retrieve information from my email, which is where this becomes a bit of an agent, right? Because it's able to use tools. Some of the other steps that we have, we've got these skills. These are basically just like pre-written prompts for you. So find my most recent or find my unread emails within a time period, extract information from a source, decide, we'll use this step, so I'll cover that later, and summarize, so really summarize information. Tools, check, and filter. I feel like I had a different option earlier. I felt like I had 3, however, now I have 2. We've got Gmail. When I receive an email, mark something as read, delete an email. Notify me in chat. I also had 3 options for notify me in chat a couple of days ago. One was like notify someone else. We'll see if that comes up later. Google Sheets, adding rows, we'll use that later. Drive, attach a file somewhere. So imagine you receive an email with an attachment, you can now store that in a specific folder that Gemini might be able to determine for you. Creating documents, and then a bunch of other things that I've sort of changed. Down at the bottom, there are some third-party apps like Confluence, Asana, HubSpot, etc. that you do need to set up that configuration. However, let's build this. So my first step is going to be asking Gemini to go and do some research on some competitors. I'm going to grab the prompt from my Gemini I wrote earlier. Well, I say I wrote, it wrote for me. I don't write prompts. Here we go. And this prompt is basically saying, can you please, there's nothing special in here, and I'll share these afterwards if it's relevant. In fact, I'll share the workflow afterwards so you can import it into yours. You are a marketing intelligence assistant. You want to go and look at these 4 competitors. Instead of manually loading in these 4 competitors, I'm instead going to add those competitors to an Excel document. Excel, sorry, I'm so sorry. A Google Sheet. And that Google Sheet has literally just got the names of my competitors and the links to their blogs and their websites. Right, it's a very straightforward Google Sheet. I made it 5 minutes ago. Here it is. You could do something more complicated, but what I want to show you is that we can pull information from other sources into this tool. So what I'm going to do is, what I can't do in here is just purely bring in that sheet from nothing. Like I can't say go to a Google Sheet, go and find this information, or I can't do that reliably necessarily. So what I'll do is I'll add another step. I'm going to choose the option to get sheet contents. And in this step, I'll be asked to choose my spreadsheet. I'll choose this competition spreadsheet. And then it's going to ask me to choose my sheet. I'll choose the first tab of that sheet, which is competitor info. And then it's going to ask me what data to select from this sheet. And this is where it gets slightly more complicated, but it's really not very complicated. Something went wrong. I don't actually want that tab, so I shouldn't have done that. Hopefully I'll put it back this time. Here we go. So now we have our option to find our rows in our spreadsheet. So you may wish to use this on a particular column and find just certain values from that column. I'm going to use it to find everything. I won't go in this session into detail about how we can find all bunch of different stuff with this. But you'll see here that for this particular column, the competition column, I'm going to say if there's any value in any cell, I want that information in my workflow. Obviously, that could become huge if I have a massive spreadsheet, so use that with caution. Competitor website. I also want to pull back information from my competitor website column. And again, if there's any values in that column, I want to pull that back into my spreadsheet. And then my competition blog, I want to pull back any values from that. Now, I need to move this up in my sheet so that I can use it in my Gemini step. So the order in which you add the steps to this workflow really matter, because what we can do now in this Gemini step is if I go down to the bottom here and I press variables, I can now choose from any of the previously executed steps information that those steps are returning. So I'm going to pull back values matching competition. And if we remember what I just set up was any values that are in the competition field I want to receive. I'm then going to choose any websites, and I'm then going to choose any blogs. And now in reality, this isn't the nicest way of loading data into this spreadsheet, because what we're going to see is a list of 4 competitors, a list of 4 websites that are related to those, and then a list of their blogs. They aren't going to be in a nice tabular format or in an order that AI will be able to inherently understand incredibly easily. But this was just for a quick demonstration. You may wish to spend a bit more time on your data manipulation in future, but AI is smart enough to figure out 4 different websites are related to 4 very common brand names. So this is my second step, which is going to perform a deep web research for activity from these companies strictly within the last 7 days. My next step is a validator. And so I'll add another step. It's going to be a Gemini step again. And this is going to validate the output that that previous step produced. Now in Gemini, I prompted it earlier. I told it what I wanted. I wanted this workflow, which was do some research, validate that research, score that research, and then I'll have a decision step. And it's written me the prompt for the decision step too. The second prompt I have is this one. You are a lead editor and fact checker. I'm just going to paste this in this box. And here we'll notice it says insert the output from step 1. Let's do that. So I'm going to go here again, input data, values, my Ask Gemini step, and then this is the output that Gemini has produced for me. So I don't yet know what research Gemini is going to pull back. It could pull back absolute rubbish. it could pull back gold. And what I want to do is validate that this is real using Gemini. And I could have 1 or 2 or 3 even validation steps, probably overkill. But what is important for us is that we're not just relying on the first piece of input that Gemini provides to us. We are validating that information, and then actually we're using that information later on in the workflow. It's just really good practice to validate the information that comes back from your AI models. This is all I need to do. So it's going to take this data that came from this step, and it's going to check that that data is relevant. My final step, and because I worked with Gemini on writing these prompts, it knows the kind of information it's going to receive and the kind of information it's going to output. I'm going to have my scoring step. And this one is my strategic scorer. And that is, we'll look at it together in just a second. That is going to take the data from my second step. So this is hopefully simple stuff to follow at this point. So this is my, I wish I could rename these. This is my validation step. This is checking that that data makes sense. We'll test this together and we'll see the output in just a second, by the way. And that is now going to score based on what Gemini thinks is relevant to me, with scores between 1 and 10. Anything over 7, I care about and I want to see. Anything below that, I think is rubbish. And what this does, having this scoring step, it means that you can actually fine tune the types of information that you receive just by coming to this one prompt and changing one value. So if you're not receiving enough from Gemini, rather than going back and doing a whole bunch of prompt engineering, maybe it's just the scoring step needs a bit of tweaking. Cool. So now that has got my information about scoring. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to test this and I'm going to see what this actually looks like before I go on and I build anything else. So down here, we've got this nice little step, test run. This lets me actually test this in real life. Now, a caveat of this, if you have steps that do things, if I had a step that was send my CEO an email, or if I had a step that was remove all the information from this spreadsheet, it's going to do that even if you're in test mode. It will actively complete that action. And the thing that this does in test mode is it just shows you in a linear format what the actions are that your steps are taking. So please, 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 caveat, caveat, caveat. If you remember anything from this, test mode is not purely testing. It is actually going off and it's doing these things. And I think it says it, yeah, here. They take real actions. I'm going to hit start. Hopefully what we'll see, if there's no errors, is that this will start. It's not going to wait, obviously, until 8 o'clock weekly because I'm running the test mode. I haven't misconfigured anything, by the way. So what I'll do is I will hit this button up here and I'm going to make a copy of this workflow. I now have a perfect workflow, perfect replication of this workflow with no errors. Let's try hitting test and let's see if this one works. It might just be that Gemini is feeling overloaded. That happens sometimes too. Oh, look, it's working. So it's gone into my spreadsheet and it's found those 4 rows that match. So the it's now doing a prompt over to Gemini. That first prompt where it's doing the web research for me. So it's come back with some information. Didn't come back with much information, actually. It only came back with FlowWise as an option at this point in time. It's then checked, validated that this information is correct. So FlowWise, it was posted on the 9th of December, which is within the last 7 days. It has passed a hallucination check. This is a real person at this company. And then it scored this value. So it's giving it a score of 7 out of 10. Therefore, I would probably like to receive that information into my inbox. Next time we run this, it will probably go off and it will find some more information. So The prompt I ran earlier went and looked at 4 different websites for me and actually pulled back all the information from those websites. It was much more verbose than this. So we may wish to run from this testing, actually, we may wish to run a couple of prompts to receive information, research information, and we can combine that together before we go into the validation step. If we've got time, we can build that together too. I'm going to add another step. This step is going to be a decide step. And this is where AI can make decisions based on the information you provide it. The decide step requires your output to be true or to be false. So the message that you type in here must enable the AI to be able to make a yes or a no decision, not anything in between. So generally what I like to do is, again, go over to Gemini, get it to create me a prompt. And this one says you are a logic gate. What that means is the model is going to know that it can only do one of two things, reply with a true or false. And then I'm feeding in the information that I care about. So let me just bring in this variable. This is my scoring step. So this is basically that information scored through 1 through 10. And what I'm saying is, please go through the list of news stories that have come back, and only show me this list of news stories if any of them are above 7. And in fact, actually, this doesn't say above 7. This says greater than 7. But let's just say greater than 6, just because otherwise we might not get any interesting news stories, or I need to fine tune a previous prompt. And here I'll just add 7 in here. So now any score in that list above 7, send me a message. I'm hoping, if you're following along, you might think, actually, if he doesn't care about any stories that are below 7, maybe he wants to filter his message out. And what I could do, what I won't do actually, but what I could do is I could add an extract step before this to say extract only stories from this prompt message that are above 7. But I wanted to show you the decide step because you are probably going to be using it relatively often. You do not obviously have to write prompts like this. The only reason why I'm writing prompts like this is I want this to be a reliable workflow for this session. You could just write if any of the scores in this are above 7, and it will probably come back with a very reasonable output for you most times. This decide step, as it says, it's a check step to see which actions you should take based on an output. Every decide step comes with a if step afterwards, and you can add these if steps to the workflow without needing to have a decide step, if you remember back to the tools menu that we had. So if you've already got some data, or you've pulled some data from a spreadsheet and you don't need to use AI to make any decisions on that data, you just use an if step. Otherwise, decide step is good just to determine a true or false option. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to send this message to the chat. So one of the nice things that I can do in Google Workspace flows is I can notify me of stuff that happens inside chat. This did have someone send someone else a message, and I assume that's been abused and it's been removed. And send a message to a group. Again, I assume that's maybe been abused and removed. So now it's just, you can only send yourself messages in chat now. Let's say I want to send myself a message. That message is going to be the output from step 5. And importantly, it's the output from step 5, not the decision that was made by Gemini in step 6. All that's happening in step 6 is I'm getting a true or false value. What's happening in step 5 is that's where I've got my result. And what I'm saying in this step is determine if Luke wants to read any of these stories by checking to see if their score is above 7. I'm going to have step 5 in here. This is your news summary. And now what that's going to do is it's going to send me a chat message, and I'll show you where those chat messages go in just a moment. The other thing I want to do though is I want to be able to store this message that I receive so that I don't receive it again in the future. And so to do this, we're going to use our handy Sheets tool. So if I add a new step and I go down to Sheets, I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to think about the future. So when I run this workflow next time, and I have some news that I've already produced, I don't want to use that news again this week, or actually, if I think 2 weeks in advance, I don't want to reuse a ton of news from the past because that's going to take up a huge amount of context from my AI model. What I want to do is I want to refresh my news every single week and just consider the news that was sent last week. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clear the news that I've added from last time. And to do this, I already have a tab in my spreadsheet, which I'll show you. It's just this last research tab, which just has, this is the news that I got earlier, actually. It was a bit more verbose than what I just got back about news from Flowwise, hence the variability. And then last research is my tab. And I'm going to say in the previous research column, if there is any value, then clear it. And that's just going to go through and clear that entire column. There should only ever be one thing in there, but it'll go and clear the whole column, which is why using any in this context could be quite dangerous. But for me, I know that this is how this is going to be leveraged. It's going to clear any data, and I want it to clear any data, even if there was 2 columns. I want them both gone. Then I'm going to add one more step, which is add to a spreadsheet. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose my spreadsheet. You're probably already ahead of me. If I could click faster, I would. To add to the last research tab after the last data row, so there should be nothing in there. And I'm going to add my output from step 5. This will only happen, so I'm only going to update this news if the news that is returned for me has actually been sent to me in the chat. And that's because it's still in this if statement. So if this is true, do this. I may wish to have another step here, which is notify me in chat. Actually, I don't want this step. Caveat, if you build a step, so imagine I have a step here, which is like a decide step or a email step, or an if step. If there's any steps outside of these groups, so this is a group, this is a group, I can't ever move a step that I've already configured into one of these steps. So if you're building things and you think, actually, it would be nice for me to consider something, like if this actually has a value before I try and process it, you have to recreate that step, which is sometimes a bit frustrating. In here, I'll just have a notify me in chat step, which will say, we didn't find any interesting news this week. And I need to configure this step, which is if the decision step was false. So here I've got if the decision step is true, Luke wants to hear this news. If the decision step is false, let's just notify Luke that this ran, but there wasn't any interesting news this week. Obviously, I may just wish to not receive this notification and know that this is still working in the background, but just to show the options. Now I'm going to hit test. And I'm going to hit, now I'm going to hit start. This should go through the same steps again. However, this time we should see it pop up in my Google chat if any of those news stories that it finds are relevant. While this is running, I'm just going to give you a bit of advice. So if you're building a workflow, say this one or this one, and you get some errors, and those errors, it's not telling you where those errors are, it's just saying there's a problem with your workflow. The first thing you should do is just create a copy. So I'll make a copy of this one. And then what you should do to try and obviously hit test, much like I did a minute ago, there's nothing wrong with my other workflow. I created a copy, hit test, and it started working. If you still have errors, start deleting the steps from the end and then hit test again and just see if it starts running. And that enables you to start whittling down what the error might be. A lot of the error messages that you get in Google Workspace Studio at the moment are quite generic. this wasn't able to run because of X reason or Y reason. And those are really generic reasons that don't actually enable you to determine which of your steps is broken. So starting from the end, start testing and testing and testing, removing one step at a time until you find the culprit. This is finished. So we now have some more news come back this time, 7 and an 8, relevant information. I did some checking for us, semantic checking on that information, and made sure it was within the published within the last week. And this is all the information that blew back initially in that first prompt. So if I go over to my chat, which actually I might just be able to hit this. It comes up in your apps section. So inside your app section, you will now have these new agents. I have a number of these that send me messages all the time. And this has just told me the news inside my app section. Obviously, if I wanted links, I could say, please make sure there's links in my message. If I wanted a different structure, I could say, send me a different structure. In the masterclass, we'll actually get to the point where we can add buttons to these that let you do actions based on the information that you've returned back. So you can have buttons that come into your Google chat that you can press that then go off and do something else. So yeah, hopefully you'll join me for that masterclass. That's our first workflow. Actually, no, one thing I didn't add to this was I need to get more sheet contents and then load that into my prompt to say this was last week's result. What I won't do is, to be honest, I won't do that. I won't spend the time to do that. But you can imagine I would add another one of these sheet steps to find the second sheet, the second tab in my sheet. And then in my Gemini step, I would have a variable that basically says the content from that second sheet. I don't include this news stories again. That enables you to sort of store a bit of information between the runs of this in a spreadsheet and then use it to empower you next time. And I would doubt there are that many people that are using Workspace flows at the moment are thinking that way to be able to store some information in sheets to then use again next time. Just another quick example before I go to the caveats about Google Workspace flows, and I'll probably build this one really quick, and we'll just see the output. In my second example, in fact, I will just open up this one that I built earlier. This one again, I've just got a schedule. You could obviously choose a different trigger for this one, but I've said this is going to be my monthly email trend analysis. And this is looking through my actual emails. So if there's anything in there that is sensitive, I apologize. I don't think I have many sensitive emails, but you never know. I might say that I've been kicking off about my salary or something. So we'll see. If it does that, then it's hallucinating. So once a month. And then I've said to Gemini, you are a research coach and operations analyst. Go through my emails. And because I've turned it on so they can go through my emails, you saw that step that we took earlier in Gemini where I hit that workspace button. It's now able to go through my emails and determine what has been taking up my time over the last month in emails. So what's the longest chains? What are the common threads? Are there any things that it thinks I should potentially automate? And what I want to show here is just how it's able to go through your emails and actually pull out real information about what you've been up to. I'm just going to hit test run. I'm going to hit start. This will take a little while to go through my last months of emails, but it will come back with some information. Hopefully. And this is useful. So if you're just trying to find ambiently like opportunities to automate, you should be setting up a couple of these workflows that really say, look in my emails for any opportunity potentially for automation. And then maybe you have a workflow that's like, when you receive emails, you could say add them to a spreadsheet, and then you can load that spreadsheet information into another workspace flow once a month that says, these are the emails that I've received from these high priority people, find the common trends and themes across these specific subset. What have we got then? I've got a zombie thread, probably where I haven't messaged someone back. Yes. not very good at messaging people back via email, so apologies if you have sent me some emails. My quick stats: Stephen has sent me the most emails over the last month. He was really wanting to get a reply from me. Automation opportunities, finding requests, finding a suitable time to sync, finding a suitable time to actually have a meeting. Tell you what, let's build a quick workflow for that. I'm going to press add. I didn't know that was going to come up actually. When I get an email, specific email, in the subject line, it has find me a meeting time. So this will be something that I would add to my subject line so that I know that this is only going to kick this workflow off when my subject line contains this information. And actually, I don't need that one because I'm going to send this. So when a subject line has that information, let's find Gemini, extract the information from this meeting, from this email chain. That is the latest agreed time to meet, and book it in my diary. And then I'll have a step that is calendar. Do I have a calendar step? Or have I imagined that there's a calendar step? I've imagined there's a calendar step, so you can't automate your calendar yet. That was on the fly, could you tell? Anyway, back to my my deck. We've built those two workflows now. Second one, apologize, didn't have a lot of fluff to it, but the first one hopefully was a bit longer and showed you how we can chain agentic style prompts together and use them as validators and use them as scorers, and then only select certain information from them to actually receive in our inboxes. And you can do that for a number of different things. I just want to say though that there are a bunch of limitations at the moment with Google Workspace flows that other tools in the market, if you have access to them, might do a slightly better job than what Google is doing at the moment. One of them is errors. So if I go back into my agent space, when errors happen, so this is a workflow that doesn't have any errors. Activity has issues. When errors happen, like this one, label emails with action items. This happened at 9:38 p.m. yesterday, I think. I can't do anything when this happens. I can't say run this again. I can't say do something else if this fails. This just fails flat. It just breaks. I can't access this area of this thing failing. Like this data isn't available to me to actually run anything else off of. I can't log any information to a spreadsheet when this fails and then fire something off of that spreadsheet. So if you're using Gemini to do activities, or Studio to do activities, is normally the Gemini step that fails at this point in time. If that step fails, the thing that you're automating cannot be critical. So it cannot be a critical step in your workflow at this point in time, because there's no way of us even sending ourselves an email at this point in time to say that that has failed. The only way of you knowing is to come into Workspace Flows or to go into your Gmail. In the top right hand corner, you'll have a little flashing icon at you. So it's like a very human-led interaction. So do not build mission critical solutions in this tool at the moment because we can't control errors. If you want to make this more reliable though, you can, however, have workflows that send messages off to the paid for version of Gemini. So if you're willing to pay for Gemini API and you've got a Gemini API key that's paid for, that's going to be a lot more reliable from what I've seen than the inbuilt Gemini here, because this is based on how many people are using it, who's using it. This is one of the first things to go, as it's a free option for you to use. So bear that in mind. The other limitation is you can't choose the model that this uses. So you can't say use Google thinking model. You can't say use the Flash model. I think it's using a Flash model to do some of this stuff and then the thinking model to do other things. I think it's like an auto router. Some things take quite a long time to come back. Other things are quite quick. But you cannot make this decision yourself. So if you've got something that is complex, like that news research up front, I would love that to be more verbose. I would love that to spend more time doing more research and more digging. And at the moment, I don't really have that level of control in Studio. I could chain a number of prompts together and then combine that information together if I wanted to. Just a caveat on the workflow. So there is a limit to 20 prompts, not prompts, 20 steps that you can have in a workflow. That includes the ones inside if statements as well. So you've got 20 that you can have total in this workflow. You can re-trigger this to happen. So you can send yourself an email at the end that says kick this off again, obviously. But yeah, you've got 20 steps. Another caveat is that you've got a short execution window. So I've tested this a number of times. I've got one of my Google Workspace flows, Workspace Studio flows that is just a Gemini prompt, Gemini prompt. And I get maybe 5 to 7 minutes or I should say probably 3 to 7 minutes before it fails. And again, I think it's all just based on the amount of load that's going through these servers at the moment. But every single time it's failed, it's never got to step 20 for me and finished the entire workflow. And then the final one is, at the moment, there is quite a lot of lock-in with the Google ecosystem. The triggers in your workflows are not configurable. So you cannot build custom triggers for any data from third-party services to be triggering this workflow. So the only way that you can get things to trigger is if things are added to Sheets or added to Gmail, obviously contributing to the Google ecosystem of data that it knows about you. There's no way of, say, firing a webhook in here or having a third-party service like Salesforce update and then that triggering something in here. All has to happen from a Google sort of sourced event. That being said, if you would like to join me, if this has been interesting to you and you want to learn a bit more, you want some hands-on, practical workshops where I'll probably set you all a task and I'll get you all to try and build it and we'll have a bit of show and tell, please do come and join me on this masterclass. I'll share this deck and I'll also share the website that I've created for the masterclass that goes into it in more detail. If you hit reserve a spot, it'll just take you through to a Google form where you can register your interest, and that's where I'll be taking people. What I won't have is hundreds of people, obviously, in that session. I want this to be quite interactive, and I will take it on a first come, first serve basis. So once I send this out after this, or if you're super keen and you want to go back through the recording and get that URL before it's shared, then do feel free to do that. Or actually, probably the easiest place is to go to algomarketingflows.manus.space, and then the link is on there. Please do join me in that session where I'll be going over this in more detail. That will be over 4 weeks, where we'll do an hour or two, depending on how long I think the content needs to be, of hands-on practical work inside those sessions. And by the end of it, you should be able to build some of your own workflow steps. So you'll notice here there's some algo logos. Like I've got ones that will read really deep information from Google Documents, Google Sheets, Google Slides. I'll share this with you as well as part of the masterclass. I've got things that let you store memories between your workflow runs and join strings together and calculate values, so multiple numbers, join them together, replace text in long strings. So yeah, I've got a bunch of different things I want to show you, and this is just basically the tip of the iceberg. So thank you for coming. On this page as well, just because I was building this with Gemini, you can type in your workflow challenge and it may or may not tell you if it's possible. I do not back this, by the way. This is not me. This is purely Gemini telling you what it can do, what it thinks it can do in Workspace flows. In reality, I bet that together we can come up with some really smart solutions to what it will tell you are issues with your workflow. But again, when I share this, can I create a calendar invite? It should say no, because we tested that together. We'll see. Saying send. Oh, I don't know. I'll check that. Thank you for coming. Does anyone have it? We've got 3 minutes. Does anyone have any questions? What I would love to do, in fact, if you want this, wherever it may be, one of the lovely things about this tool is, so I've built this demo researcher. Let's give it a proper name. One of the lovely things about this tool is that I can share this. And now if you click that in the chat, it'll take you through to Google Workspace Flows and you can import this into yours. It'll have all my prompts in it. You just need to swap out the link to the sheet and maybe just hard code your competitors into that first prompt. And then you'll have your own validating, scoring, agentic researcher doing research for you on a weekly basis. So if you are making flows like this that you think are relevant to other potential people in your roles, please do share them, because it's so easy to share now. I'll be sharing some of the ones that I build, and obviously in that masterclass we'll all be building some together. So thank you for coming, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Luke.
I'm also really happy to have any constructive feedback. So do tell me what you want to see. I will make changes. Yeah, send me a message. I'm not sensitive.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Luke.
Thank you.
See you later.
See you.